China, an assimilation machine bordering on the fringes of collectivism, communism, and capitalism. Where is the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, leading China towards, and what does this all mean for the rest of the world? On July 9, 2015, the CCP launched a nationwide offensive targeting hundreds of defense lawyers and human rights defenders for detention, interrogation, and politically motivated criminal charges. The 709 crackdown, named for the date it began, was designed to intimidate a generation of lawyers and activists from representing or assisting anyone the CCP perceives as a threat to its absolute power. This wave of repression continues, demonstrated by the secret trial on June 17th, which led to the sentencing of Yu Wensheng for defending victims of the 2015 crackdown.
我永远不会接受一个当局指定的律师，除非我遭遇酷刑。
After detaining human rights lawyers like Wang Guangzhang for years and denying them visits from their family and chosen attorneys, the PRC detained those lawyers' own defense attorneys, such as Yu and Li Yuhan, without due process. The PRC has also targeted peaceful activists like Zhu Jiang and Ding Jiaji, who have worked with human rights lawyers to protect Chinese citizen rights and defend against the abuses of government officials. In this footage, you can see the Chinese police shutting down reporters covering their story outside of a courthouse.
Zhu Jiang was trying to expose corruption in China, and as he did, he was arrested. He's on trial in this courthouse now, and this is the sort of thing we have to deal with when we try to report what the Chinese government doesn't appear to want us to report. I think we'll probably hand it back to you now.
The actual size of the Uyghur population, particularly in China, has been the subject of some dispute. Official figures released by Chinese authorities place the population of Uyghurs within Xinjiang region to be just over 12 million, comprising approximately half of the total regional population, while according to the estimates of Uyghurs, there are at least 20 million of them. In provinces all over China, religious organizations, business owners, and anyone with an opposing view towards the CCP are forced to sign documents to reject their beliefs, or the government will retrieve their pensions.
In this amateur video obtained by CNN and in the Salvation Church security camera footage, police brutally beat the faithful and drag them away.
Concentration camps under the guise of re-education schools have resorted to banning practicing one's religion, cultural destruction, forced sterilization of women, and many other severe forms of repressions.
Government efforts to reduce birth rates in Xinjiang are both systematic and ruthless. We are talking the mass forced insertion of intrauterine contraceptive devices. We are talking threats of internment for those who violate birth control policies.
US Customs and Border Protection seized 13 tons of hair products worth an estimated $800,000, which is suspected of being forcibly removed from Uyghurs imprisoned in concentration camps. CCP's hatred propaganda, coupled with police brutality towards the Uyghurs, has resulted in other non-minority groups' violence and mistreatment of minorities in the absence of justice and law. That is how the Chinese government continues, under the pretext of fight against terrorism, to treat the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Muslim minorities living in Xinjiang region in the far west of China. International pressure has served little to alleviate the situation, and neither has the small minority of dissent that is usually quickly crushed and re-educated into submission. Tibet was indeed an independent country until it was invaded and annexed by China.
When Chinese army entered 1950 in the Tibetan area, the Chinese army already crushed around 7,000 to 8,000 Tibetan soldiers.
China has been systematically dismantling their cultural and religious items, such as taking down prayer flags, which are a significant tenet of Tibetan culture and religious beliefs. Tensions have been worsened by the deployment of Chinese army near the Indian border. Beijing's strategic interests are its activities targeted at bringing European businesses close to Chinese partners by opening up some opportunities to operate on Chinese soil. The very same can be said about heightened expansion of Chinese-based firms and their broad know-how to conquer Europe on different levels of economy, business and technology, and in partnership with governments and privately held entities all across the region. If there are 3 countries in the region that welcome China with open arms, the Czech Republic, Hungary and Serbia, each one has very different stories behind their ties to China. In Hungary's case, part of the rhetorical affiliation to China can be explained by Viktor Orban's attempt to gain more leverage inside the European Union. In 2018, he warned that if the EU doesn't offer Hungary more funds for infrastructure, his government will turn to China. The only reason some factories in Romania came under Chinese control over this period is because Chinese companies bought the Western companies that initially owned them: Pirelli, Smithfield, Takata, Nidera, and others. Montenegro became known worldwide as a victim of China's debt trap diplomacy. It is one of only 3 countries in the CEE region and in Europe that didn't have a highway. Montenegro desperately wanted one, but the Western banks weren't interested in financing a project that just wasn't profitable. China, without being interested in feasibility studies, stepped in, leading to a boom in Montenegro's debt. China is also strengthening its influence among African countries. Air and sea routes are increasing between China and African nations as massive deals are made for commodities, trade, labor, and military cooperation. Chinese private schools, embassies, and cultural centers are popping up in places like Rwanda, Nairobi, and Angola. While trade has increased from 5 million yuan to 6 billion in the last 10 years, and many contend that Africa is getting the short end of the stick, importing cheap Chinese toys and goods while exporting valuable commodities like oil and timber. It's estimated that 70% of African timber ends up in Chinese ports, a figure that hints its massive deforestation. China is hungry for land, food, and energy. While accounting for 1/5 of the world's population, its oil consumption has risen 35-fold in the past decade, and Africa is now providing 1/3 of it. Imports of steel, copper, and aluminum have also shot up, with Beijing devouring 80% of world supplies. Apart from African countries, China has been increasing its influence in almost all over the world, and the only tool that has been used for many years was money. A dozen of these countries owe debt of at least 20% of their nominal GDP to China. The Belt and Road Initiative, formerly known as One Belt, One Road, is a global development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013, involving infrastructure development and investments in nearly 70 countries and international organizations. Saudi Arabia has close relationships with 3 major players of the world politics and economy: the United States, Russia, and China. China is the biggest consumer of oil in the world, and Saudi Aramco is its biggest single supplier of crude material. Beijing and Riyadh made waves by signing a $28 billion trade deal that includes plans for Saudi Arabia to build a $10 billion petrochemical complex in China that will refine and process Saudi oil. Iran's main trading partner is China, with 21% of total exports and 17% of imports. Iran has always described the killing of members of groups serving its geostrategic interests in countries such as Yemen, Bahrain, Syria, and Palestine as a violation of human rights. However, Tehran supports China's repressive policy against Uyghur Muslims since China is its largest political and trade partner. Iran's IRGC terrorist organization, recognized by the United States, has found the Chinese government the only steady supplier of its missile and military technology to crack down dissent inside Iran and export terrorism in the Middle East. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the entire world has been pushed to the brink and could certainly make concerted efforts to preserve the health and wealth of people across the world. However, China has seized this opportunity to aggressively exert their gargantuan political might over border disputes, production, mining, and a whole plethora of other domestic and global issues. What will the CCP do when they have what they want?